Hi, first graders. So yesterday you guys listened to part 1 and part 2 of chapter 1. So just a little recap of the book Socks by Beverly Cleary. Yesterday in chapter 1 there were 2 kids selling kittens at a supermarket. And the girl did not want one of the cats, who she named Socks, get sold because she wanted to keep him. But this couple ended up adopting them. And they were on their way home, so let's find out what happens in Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is called The Bricker's Other Pet. Let's find out what their other pet is. The Brickers drove Socks to a shabby house with a weedy lawn, a fragrant lemon bush, and geraniums growing in earth comfortable for a kitten to dig in. They made a bed for Socks from a carton and an old sweatshirt and placed it by the laundry beside his dish. They did not object when he chose instead to sleep on the couch in the living room, which, except for a chair with loopy upholstery, was furnished in what the Brickers described to their college student friends as contemporary cast-off. They fed their canned and dry cat foods and bought raw meat for him. They wiped his paws on a good bath towel whenever he came in with wet feet, because they had not been married long enough to have an old bath towel, and when the winter rains came, they supplied him with a pan of kitty litter. The Brickers talked to their cat. "Socks, you're getting a lot of service around here," said Mr. Bricker as he left his studies to get down on his hands and knees and retrieve the ping-pong ball Socks had batted under the chest of the drawers out of reach for his paw. "Such silky fur," Mrs. Bricker poked in her just for Socks voice as she left off typing to press her cheek against his coat and let her long... Here's the picture. And let her long hair fall over like a curtain. Socks' throat throbbed with purrs. He was especially happy when he could interrupt her work on the papers that she typed for students. Her typewriter was his rival for her attention, and Socks did not like rivals. The only real unpleasantness in Socks' new life was an unhappy day spent in a veterinary office, which was soon forgotten. Socks thrived. His eyes changed from blue to the color of new leaves. He grew into a sleek cat, affectionate toward his loving owners, but firm about getting his own way. He was the center of the Bricker household, and he was content. Then a strange thing happened. Mrs. Bricker's lap began to shrink. One day, Socks was perfectly comfortable resting on her knees, and the next day, he did not have quite enough room. Each time he napped on her lap, he had to curl himself into a tighter ball with his tail wrapped more closely around his body. Finally, one evening, when trying to find room to rest his chin, he lost his balance and fell onto the floor with a thump. Both Brickers burst out laughing. Socks was insulted. He turned his back and twitched his tail back and forth across the carpet to show his displeasure. "Poor Socks," said Mrs. Bricker between giggles. "You lost your dignity, didn't you?" "Come on, old boy," Mr. Bricker said. "Try my lap for size." He moved his chair away from his desk and made room. The tail twitched. The Brickers would have to work harder before Socks would forgive them. Owners must be disciplined. If they really wanted to be forgiven, they would have to tempt him with a snack from the refrigerator. Instead of going to the kitchen, Mrs. Bricker suddenly said in an urgent voice, "Bill, it's time to go." "Are you sure?" Mr. Bricker's voice registered excitement, worry, and joy all at once. Socks waited. These people had to learn. "I'm positive," Mrs. Bricker, in a small, scared voice. "This is it." With great dignity, Socks stuck to the one piece of furniture forbidden him, the chair with the loopy upholstery. He placed his forepaws on the chair, arched his back, and pulled. Rip, rip, rip. There. Uh-oh, it doesn't seem like Socks is getting into anything good. The Brickers gave Socks attention, but not in the way that he expected. He found himself snatched up, carried down the hall, and tossed into the dark laundry beside his pan of kitty litter. The door shut after him. "Sorry, old boy," said Mr. Bricker as he gave the door an extra push to make sure it was latched. After a moment of shocked silence, Socks let out a yowl of rage and waited for release. He could hear the Brickers talking in quick, anxious voices. He could hear the whir-whir-whir of the telephone dial, but he did not hear anyone coming down the hall to let him out. Socks meowed his loudest, crossest meow. Footsteps hurried, the front door slammed. Out on the driveway, the old station wagon started, died, started again, and drove away. The house was silent, so was Socks. After months of catnip and kidney, of service and attention, to be treated like this? In the days that followed, Mr. Bricker dumped food into Socks's dish early in the morning before he left the house, and again in the night after he returned. But in between, Socks was alone. He waited on his windowsill. He slept. He hooned his paws on the forbidden chair, although the sport was gone. The ringing of the telephone made him anxious when no one was home to answer. The buzzing of the doorbell frightened him so that he hid under the bed, but he need not have bothered now. No one came to the door to open it. Socks lost interest in food. His ping-pong ball no longer amused him. Without love, he was bewildered and dejected. Then, late one morning, Socks was roused from a doze by the slam of a station wagon door in the driveway and the sound of voices of both his owners. With glad meows, he sprang from the couch. As soon as the door opened, Socks was outside, his forepaws against Mrs. Bricker's thighs, stretching up to be pet. A light breeze ruffled his fur, and spring sunshine drew the fragrance from the lemon blossoms. Life was good again. "Did you miss me, Socks?" Mrs. Bricker stooped to rub the hollow behind his ears, where his fur grew short and fine. Were you lonesome without me?" she asked. Socks' throat pulsated with purrs. He rubbed against her legs, back and forth, round and round, as she entered the house. He could not get enough petting to satisfy his pent-up loneliness. "I miss you too," said Mrs. Bricker in such an understanding voice that Socks felt he must take advantage of her. With a hopeful meow, he started toward the kitchen, paused, and looked back to encourage her to follow him to the refrigerator. Until that moment, he had been so happy to see his family that he had not noticed the bundle in Mrs. Bricker's arms. Socks hesitated, which was more important: a tidbit from the refrigerator or his right to investigate everything that had came into the house. Curiosity won, and he turned back. "See what we've brought?" said Mr. Bricker. A smacking noise came from inside the bundle. Instantly, Socks was alert. There was something alive in there. His spine prickled, and he paused a sniff cautiously. Mrs. Bricker folded back the blanket, and Mr. Bricker leaned over so Socks could see. He saw a creature with a small, wrinkled, furless face, a sight that made his hair stand on end. His eyes grew large, and he backed away. Whatever the thing was, he did not trust it. There's Socks taking a peek. So that is part 1 of chapter 2. I'm going to record another video for you to listen to the rest of the chapter, and let's see what that new pet is that Socks is so interested in.